If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello, Internet. You know, I'm sure you're getting bored with me here because I keep on saying to you, I'm excited when I speak to people. But I really am. Because in South Africa, there were many famous regiments and battalions, as we call them. And two of them are outstanding. One would be 32 Battalion, which we've had many episodes upon. Basically only because they came to me. No other reason. I was never part of 32 Battalion. Don't claim any such fame. No such honors, but they came to legacy and therefore they were recorded. And the same invitation is for every one of you out there. If you come to me, you will be recorded. It's very seldom to almost, it happened only once that I said to my uncle, I can't record him because he was like in the espionage business. He was still living in the country where he was doing his espionage business, and I felt he might be endangered if he speaks to us. Now, one of the other very famous battalions was 31 or 201 Battalion, known as the Bushmen. And we are lucky today. We have a former commanding officer here. It's Colonel PD van der Merwe, PD van der Merwe. I'm not saying that in English. Van der Merwe, I suppose, if I wanted to. Sir, you are most welcome here. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate you. Let us start at the beginning. How did you end up in the army in the first place?
Because when I finished my matric in 1973, it happened as with all other young boys of that age. I was called up to do national service. I started my national service in 1974 in Kimberley at the then 11th Commando. From there, I was chosen to do a junior leaders course in Oudtshoorn for about 9 months. I did the normal junior leadership courses, and included in that was I was then also trained as a medium machine gun platoon commander in the old Vickers machine gun. I then received my commission on the 1st of December 1974 and was placed at the 2 South African Infantry Battalion group in Walvis Bay, as it is sometimes called the Strafkamp in the Dana. So I've spent from 1974, the end of 1974, till the end of 1983, I was a member of 2 South African Infantry Battalion, started as a second lieutenant, going through the ranks and ended up as a captain when I was transferred out of Tucson. One of the main, let's call it highlights for me when I was still in 2 South African Infantry Battalion was I was part of Operation Savannah in 1975, where we initially were sent to Ruacana, where we controlled the Portuguese people coming out of Angola into South Africa. And then I was formed part of Battle Group Orange, where I was deployed with the Vickers machine guns. So I had a platoon of Vickers machine guns that was part of Battle Group Orange for Operation Savannah. So as I said, that was one of the highlights of my stay in Walvis Bay at the 2 SA Infantry Battalion. And then in the end of 1983, I was transferred as a captain still to the then 201 Battalion in the Western Caprivi, which is the Bushmen Battalion, as the second in command of the battalion. So it was a new experience for me as well as my family, because I was married at that stage with one child. We went to Omega, which is in the Western Caprivi, where the battalion was situated. We traveled there by means of a SAML 50 because we were not allowed to have our vehicles there. We were not allowed to have our own furniture there. So that was all provided for us. So we traveled there by a SAML 50 from from Walvis Bay with only our clothing that we were going to use. It was a totally new experience for me when I got to Omega, because Omega was a town on itself. There were more than 400 Bushman families living in Omega, about 30 white families. The leader group of the battalion was also living with their families at Omega. So I've never experienced it before. So when I got there, it was an eye-opener for me. And the funny thing is, when I got to Omega in 1984, the beginning of 1984, they were part of an operation. The whole battalion was deployed, and I was actually the home guard commander when I got there. Without there were no troops at that stage. They were involved in Operation Askari for quite a while. So I just wanted to emphasize one thing, and that is that there's a perception among some people out there that the Bushmen were utilized as trackers. They are good trackers, or they were good trackers, and they still are good trackers. But the unit was a fighting unit on its own, as was 3-2 Battalion was a fighting unit. So we were on the same level. We were deployed as a unit. So the perception that they were only used as trackers, that is not true at all. There were, we were deployed mostly in the southern parts of Angola. We were very seldom deployed internally in the then Southwest Africa. We were deployed outside. We were deployed as reaction force teams with buffels. That is where maybe we differed from 101 Battalion, where they were deployed with Caspers, we were deployed with buffels. So for the whole duration of the deployment, they will be deployed in southern Angola. We worked on a system where the battalion was divided into 2 groups, if you can call it like that, made up of 2 companies. And then they were deployed for 6 weeks per deployment period. Maybe there's one thing that I must also mention is that the battalion existed or were made up of 2, let's call it tribes of Bushmen. The one was called the Vasekela, which is maybe the Bushmen as we know them, the small yellow person, whereas the Barakwena, which was the other tribe that was in the battalion, was the more bigger black Bushman or black person. So, but they coexisted very well. There were no fights whatsoever within the battalion. And they also deployed the system where we had one Vasekela company and one Barakwena company, which made up the group that deployed. So they deployed as a group, and they worked very well together. Some of the other things which I can maybe highlight from Omega is there were a lot of socio-economic upliftment done within the battalion. First of all, there were a school for the Bushman children. They were taken into the school, and the school followed the normal curricula of the department. So they were on the same level as all the other schools in South Africa, and even for that matter in South Africa. There was a pre-primary school, if you can call it that, especially for the children of the white families or the leader group families that were there. And the other thing that was established at the unit was an adult education center. Remember, many of these soldiers came to Omega from Angola, where they were fighters, and they came voluntary to Omega, where they formed part of the unit, but their schooling lacked. So and as it was at the moment at that stage, to be promoted to a certain level within the unit, and for also within the then Southwest African Territorial Force, was you must have a certain level of education, which they did not have on both sides. So an adult education center was established, where we made use of teachers who were doing their national service, which were seconded to us, and they followed a special adult education program, which was provided to us from the Department of Education in the then Southwest Africa. So that was part of the social upliftment and the training of the members. We also trained our own members. We had a few intakes of soldiers, especially the younger ones that came. They were children when they came out of Angola, but they grew up in Omega and they became soldiers. During my stay at Omega, we had 3 intakes of Bushmen, where we trained them as soldiers, and they were also utilized as soldiers during the deployments. As I said, it is a town on its own, Omega, and the unit was responsible for its own sewerage, its own electricity, its own water, refuse removal, everything that goes with the management of a town we had to do. So the experience that I have picked up, and I think that many of the people that have been there picked up, is actually how to run a town. We could have been employed back in South Africa as a town manager or a town planning manager for that matter. So that was also a very big experience. The electricity and in the unit was provided by 2 very big generators, which supplied the electricity to the unit 24 hours a day, because there were a lot of things to be run. The water was or came from boreholes into a very big tank, which was inside the unit. And I think many of the people that have visited Omega and were there will always remember Oops, because that was the name of the tank, or the water tank where the water was stored. And the main reason behind the name Oops was if there was a problem with the water supply, many of the people will say, oops, the tank is empty again. So at the end of the day, somebody put the name Oops on the tank. And that is sewerage was also run by the unit. It created quite a lot of problems, but we sorted it out. The other thing is also the Bushmen were housed in what was called kimbos. It is the Bushman word for a house. Initially they were housed. It was one room construction. It did, however, and I think my predecessor, Colonel Brian Adams, started it where they started adding on rooms to the Bushman's kimbos. So at the end of the day, depending on what they could afford, because they had to pay at the end of the day for the add-ons, but depending on what they could pay, they could end up with a 3 or 4 room house at the end of the day. So there was a lot of things that were done for them. As I said, they coexisted within the unit and within Omega without any problems. We never had any problems between the two tribes, and they were very, very good fighters. So I said the perception that they were only trackers is not true at all. They had a lot of successes during their deployment, and I think they can be very compared to the best units that were. I don't want to say they can compare to C2 Battalion, because C2 Battalion's role was totally different from what the battalion's role was. But I think we can be put on the same level with 101 Battalion, where they were deployed and with their successes and what they achieved. So it is a very, as I said, the Bushmen were a very good fighting unit, and they were deployed in the southern parts of Angola for the duration of the deployments while I was at the unit, and also before that.
I just want to ask you a quick question, sir, about Walvis Bay, Tusai. There's a Dune 7 there. And for those of you who don't know what Dune 7 is, man, go and look. It's the 7th highest dune in the world. It really is. It looks like a mountain. If you stand below it, in my time, there were like dry areas there. But if you stand below it and you look up, it's really, really steep. Trust me, it's extremely steep. Now, I've heard that Tusai soldiers would actually run up and down that dune. Is that true?
Because yeah, that is true. And in the earlier years, they even run up the dune with their weapons and with their kit. But unfortunately, somewhere along the line, one of the members lost his weapon, and the weapon became buried under the sand. So there came a decision that if you run up the dunes, you will do it without especially the weapons. So yeah, we ran up it. Luckily, I was not made to do it, because I made them do it, as I was a platoon commander. That's it. But we definitely ran up and down, and there were just outside the base. There were also other dunes which were a bit smaller, but which also were used for physical training. But yeah, that's why I said in the beginning, they were always talking about the strafkamp in die duine, because the dunes were used for a oppie, if you will can understand that. Talking about Walvis Bay, maybe coming back to it, it was a very nice place to be, but also difficult on the one hand. And I must, maybe it is all over, and my subordinates know about this incident. In 1982, I bought a new car, a blue Toyota Corolla, and we had a parade, a mechanized parade or a motorized parade in Swakopmund, which is just 30 kilometers from Walvis Bay. But we left with buffels that morning, and my wife told me she will come through later on and have a look at the parade. But that morning when we woke up, it was east west here. The wind was blowing from the dunes, and it was sand all over. So thinking that my wife grew up in Walvis Bay, she will not drive, because your car can get sandblasted. I thought she would stay at home, but not to be. When we stopped the columns after the parade, and I looked down, and my car was beneath the buffel. There were some spots on my car that wasn't there when I bought it. So when I climbed down, I saw that my car was actually sandblasted. It was the undercoat that was coming. So the wind and the eastern weather in Walvis Bay is something to experience. But that was a story, and they still tease me about my new car that had to be painted after that little trip to Swakopmund. The other let's say experience or which some people never experience, is that we, because it was a battalion group, it was not only an infantry battalion, it was a battalion group where you also had the armor and the artillery in the unit. So there were times that we as the infantry, I was in the infantry at this time, had combined exercises with the armor and the artillery, which I think for second lieutenant, just coming into the army, it is a hell of an experience to do that, because not all people do get the chance to do a exercise, a live exercise with the armor and the artillery, where they shoot with the 5.5s and the Eland armored cars. So that was also a very good experience for me.
It was a very peculiar place, Walvis Bay, because it was part of Cape Town, or the Cape Province anyway, funny enough. And I really wish to know, sir, how did you prevent rust on your armored vehicles?
You actually could not prevent it. That is why the armored cars and the artillery, they were situated at Reykop. That was about 20 kilometers outside of Walvis Bay, where there was less rust than inside in the base. Well, if you leave something outside for the night, you can be sure you'll get rust at the end of the day. We had with our cars in the garages which we had at the living in quarters, we had sawdust on the floors of the garages to prevent the moist from coming from the ground, because most of the streets in Walvis Bay at that stage were made of sand, and there were no tarred roads. I think there was one tar road in Walvis Bay at that time. So if there's the mist came in and it gets wet in the morning, all the sand goes underneath your car and it starts rusting from the bottom. You can still prevent the body from getting rust by, but then you have to wash it every day and take down the mist that is there every day of the week in Walvis Bay. So yeah, it was very difficult. So the maintenance, also the vehicles of the unit, the infantry vehicles, the Bedfords at that stage, and the Land Rovers, so they were also housed at Reykop, which, as I said, were 20 kilometers outside Walvis Bay, and there were less risk of rust at that stage.
Yes, that's where the Air Force was, the airport, I believe. There was an air base.
Yeah, the Reykop Air Force Base was situated there. The runway is still there. It is now Walvis Bay. It's an international airport where you can fly in directly from South Africa or from Cape Town, Johannesburg, or Tambo. So yeah, it was just, they were next to one another. Also, the ammunition dump was outside at Reykop. Mainly also because of the mist and the rust that were more prevalent inside, because we were next to the sea.
Yes, and there's a fog which comes in, and that thing is, but that reminds me, sir, how do you navigate in that desert? Because you can't really see the stars with the fog around. And that fog is really something else, and it all looks the same. There's no really any points which you can take reference with.
Yeah, it was difficult to navigate, and it created a lot of problems when you had to do map reading and navigation in the desert, and a lot of the sections got lost during navigation exercises. So yeah, you had to rely very heavily on your map. There were maps available for the desert and your compass, because at that stage we did not have any GPSs or something, which would have made it much easier to navigate. So at that stage you were reliant on your map and your compass, and that is how we navigated. So, but as I said, a lot of the sections got lost because it's not that easy, especially when it comes during the night as well, because when the mist comes in from the sea, as you said, there's no stars or whatever that you can even remotely use for navigation. So you have to rely on that. But we managed it. Luckily, we haven't had to do any fighting in the desert. So we haven't had to navigate to get to a point. Yeah, it was difficult.
I spoke to a senior officer, so I will leave his name alone. I'll leave it out. But he said to me, the most dangerous thing in the world is a second lieutenant with a compass and a map. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, well, it's also said, but there's also a counter for that. More dangerous than the lieutenant with the map and the compass is maybe the sergeant or the corporal that had to teach the lieutenant to use the compass and the map. So yeah, it was a saying all over when they wanted to get to the second lieutenant to say that. But that's why I'm saying there's also the other side of it, who taught the lieutenant to use the map and the compass. But I must say, throughout my career, the members that I've worked with, my subordinates, while I was a second lieutenant, my superiors, there was never a time that we got lost. Even when we got to Angola in Operation Savannah, that was not the easiest because we did not know the area, but we never got lost. So yeah, I think that is maybe just saying it with a tongue in the cheek that the lieutenant cannot navigate.
May I ask you about Savannah, sir? Because we had some fellow here on Legacy, Laurie Sochat, who was actually at Tusai. He was a signaler, and then he got sort of hijacked into Savannah. A very, very fascinating fellow. But I want to know from you, when Savannah exploded, when it happened, did you people had any idea it's going to happen until the orders came from Pretoria to deploy?
You see, when we initially deployed, as I said, we were deployed to Ruacana, our headquarters, the company headquarters. I was in headquarters company at that stage, where we were with the Vickers, the mortars, the assault pioneers, and the anti-tank platoons. So we were stationed at Ruacana and deployed around Ruacana. I was at some stage deployed at a gate about 10 kilometers into Angola to control the people coming out of Angola, the Portuguese people. So at that stage, we didn't know that we were going in. Also, before we went in, we were picked up at Ruacana, and we were flown down to Grootfontein, where myself specifically was told there's a train coming in tonight from Pretoria. You must get your vehicles, and if you get your vehicles, then you must come and collect your vehicles. So we know something was happening, but we didn't know exactly where we were going. So we left Grootfontein after we got our vehicles. Myself, the Vickers platoon had 8 Land Rovers with their little half-ton sleepwaantjie with the Vickers on, a Unimog for the logistics, and myself had a Land Rover. So when we left in a convoy, Battle Group Orange to Silva Porto, where we spent a few days at the Roman Catholic Church, which became the headquarters for I think the area. And from there on, we moved on a road on the way to Malanje, where we encountered the first contact with the enemy, and it was also the first time that we encountered the 122 millimeter red eye, as it was called. That was the first time, and it was quite an experience to see those things coming. But we weathered it. And it was also there that I, for the first time, deployed, I think, the Vickers in a offensive role, where I was deployed just behind the infantry, which was in foxholes, and I had to deploy the Vickers on the road, which is not the best tactical deployment, but that is the only way that we could see, and had a arc of fire to the front. So then we deployed it and had a few shots, but unfortunately we could not go further because the breach was blown. So that actually stopped our advance on that route. And thereafter, we were pulled out, the Vickers platoon specifically, and I think also the Tusa company, which was the company that was also with the Orange Battle Group, were pulled out from the front, and we flew back to Grootfontein, or yeah, we flew back to Grootfontein from Silverport, and from Grootfontein then we went back to Walvis Bay by train. So we got back at the unit just after Christmas in 1975. So we didn't stay till the end of the campaign in 1976. So we pulled out before that. But to answer your question, because no, we didn't know where we were going until we were detailed or briefed in detail in Silverport to say what we were going to do, because the south of Angola were then already captured. So there was no resistance up to Silverport. Going from there forward, then that is where we started encountering the opposition. So yeah, that is how we went. And just maybe a funny thing about not a funny thing, but personal experiences. When we started with Savannah, my English was also maybe mostly for defensive actions. So because we had a 50-50 language policy, but we only used the 150, which is Afrikaans. So I ended up with a signaller by the surname of Brown, an Englishman. So we then decided, if we're going to talk to one another, we will have to sort something out. So we came to an agreement that he will only talk Afrikaans to me, he will learn his Afrikaans, and I will talk English to him. So I always say that is where I learned to speak English, not only as a defensive measure, but maybe to also communicate with other people. Because the two of us were alone in the Land Rover. The rest of the platoon was following, but it was only the two of us in the Land Rover. So we had to get a method of talking to one another, and we thought it was a good idea to learn one another's language.
Now that's fascinating. So I have a technical question for you, if you don't mind. I know that the army changed the Bren guns, the light machine guns, to the 7.62 NATO caliber from the 303. So did the same happen to your Vickers machine guns, or were they still on the 303 caliber?
No, they also changed from 303 to 7.62. When I did my training in Oudtshoorn, we still had the 303 Vickers, and we still had the Vickers with the cloth band, which then changed to the 7.62, which had the metal band where the things was loaded. So yeah, we did change from 303 to 7.62.
When these Portuguese people arrived, the civilians fleeing from Angola towards safety in Namibia, as it's called today, do you have any observations about them in the state they were in, vehicles they were using?
Of course, they were using a variety of vehicles. Some came there with very nice cars. Some came by truck, which had a lot of families on. And the idea that we got is that it is a question of they grab what they could in a very short time. They weren't given time to collect all the items. So they just grabbed what they could, and they just wanted to get out of the area, because I think at that stage we were not in yet, not participating in the war yet, but there was a lot of fighting amongst the three groups within Angola. So it was mostly, or it were mostly Portuguese people coming up, and they had, as I said, they only grabbed what they could. The only thing that we had to check for is weapons. They were not allowed to bring weapons into the then South Africa. The rest of the items they could keep. So we had to confiscate all the weapons at the checkpoint, and I must say they were beautiful weapons that we confiscated, that I think they tried to bring out, maybe to keep, or maybe to use as a protection while fleeing down south. So yeah, they were refugees, and as I said, I think they only grabbed what they could and tried to get out of the fighting area as soon as they can, to just get to a place of safety. Some of them had food with them. Some of them came without any food, and you could see they were suffering. Some of them. What they did or what happened to them afterwards, I'm not 100% sure. I know some of them were escorted down to Walvis Bay in a convoy with their vehicles, where they got, I think, got onto a ship and were sent over to Portugal. But that I'm not 100% sure. But the ones that we saw where we were at the checkpoint, you could see they had suffered, and it was not nice for them to flee the country, because many of them had farms, they had businesses which they just left as it was.
Yes, they've been there for hundreds of years, and they suddenly just left, as you say. I saw some pictures of them, and they really look like they were gone through hell. They were glad to be under the South African Army protection, so to speak. But if we can move to the Bushman battalions, you know, there's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of lies. One of the reasons why legacy exists. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Some might be very stupid, but I assure you, that's the type of thing I've heard. So let us start with how you recruited your Bushman soldiers. Because I spoke to a fellow here in Europe who assured me that he's fully aware of the fact that you people captured them like animals, and then they were lined up with chains around their necks, women and children included, by the way. Then they were sort of driven like you would do with a herd of sheep all the way to Meka. And there the South Africans bullied them and worked them psychologically until they became part of the army. And the white officers and non-commissioned officers had to really work with them all the time, you know, to bully them so that they could follow orders. So is there any truth in the nonsense I just said to you?
Of course, no. Categorically, no. There were a lot of books written about the history of the unit. But in short, the Fletchers, or the Vaskella Bushmen, many of them were Fletchers. They were part of the Portuguese army in Angola. So when the war or the conflict between the groups started, and the Portuguese started withdrawing from Angola, they had nowhere to go. Remember, they were fighting on the Portuguese side against the MPLA, the FNLA, and UNITA, for that matter. So they had nowhere to go. So they were very afraid of being, let's call it, executed by those groups, because they were fighting against them. So they started moving out of Angola, where they were, let's say, gathered by the then Colonel or Commandant Jalwe Lindford, the famous Commandant Jalwe Lindford, So they were never captured or anything. They came voluntary. They were gathered because they were actually fleeing the fighting in Angola between the groups, because they were fighting on the Portuguese side against the three. So you can imagine for yourself, if they got hold of them, the groups get hold of the Bushmen, they would have been executed there and then. The same with the Baragwanath Bushmen. Some of them were part of the FNLA, and they also became part of Colonel Linford's group. That was in 1974, 1975. And then Colonel Linford put them together as a battalion or a group. They were called the Alpha Group at that stage. And then they, together with Bravo Group, which was the then 3-2 battalion members, also participated in Operation Savannah. And after that, they had nowhere to go. Where would they go? The MPLR took over in Angola, so they could not go back. Because remember, they were part of the Fletchers. They fought against them. They fought against them during Operation Savannah. So they could not go back. So they were given a home in Alpha Base. That was the first base that was established in the Western Cape. At that stage, it was only the men that were there, but their families were still somewhere in Angola. So the family started gathering, and maybe through the Bush Telegraph and members telling them, they started also coming to Alpha Base. So they were at some stage, and that is where it started, where the Bushmen was settled. Their family started coming also to the Alpha camp, and at one stage they had to look for more permanent place to settle them, because there were not that many things for them, like sewerage, etc., etc. So they had to look for a more permanent place, and then they established the Omega base. So, as I said, never being captured, they came voluntary. They joined the Defence Force voluntary, and they stayed there. We never had to indoctrinate or to try and change their mindset to become part of it. They were part of it. They accepted the leader group, the white leader group, 100%. Not very easily in the beginning, and I think I can vouch for that. When I came to Omega in 1984, I've never been deployed with them. They've never seen me. So for the first 3 months, when they were trooped in and out by aircraft, I was standing on the next to the runway saying hello and greeting them when they get off the aircraft, and they just ignored me in a sense. They were maybe not the heads, but that was it. And then in March 1984, I deployed with them for a period in the eastern side of Sector 10, Uvamboland, in Congo base. So I was there with them for a period. I deployed with them and went with them wherever they went out. And from that day on, I was recognized as a member of the unit. And when they got off the plane, they greeted me. And when they were trooped out, they greeted me. So it's not a question that we had to smuggle, as I say, smuggle their heads to become part of the unit. They were voluntary volunteers, and that was their career. When after Savannah they started, and they were taught at Omega with the same as any other infantryman was trained. So and that's why I said they were not trackers. They were a fighting unit per se. They were deployed as a unit. They were deployed as reaction force teams, and they had a lot of successes with that.
I want to make an observation here, sir. A Bushman is not the biggest of people physically. You as a big, strong Afrikaner type of fellow would be twice their size, probably. Did it make you a good target for the enemy? Because they could clearly identify you, perhaps much easier than they could with 3-2 battalion.
Of course, it might have been. We have never investigated it. We have never encountered a tendency of the leader group being targeted. But I think with the deployment of white leader group with any black soldier, and I think with the knowledge that or was known at that stage that the Bushmen were deploying with black leader group, or white leader group, it may have been. But as I said, we never encountered a tendency that the enemy were going for just for the leader group. We have lost very few leader group during the whole duration of the deployment of the unit. We have lost quite a few of our members in contact, but no, I don't think. And if it was, we never picked it up. You see, what it was the same with 101 battalion. 101 battalion at the Wambus, okay, maybe size-wise they were the same, but color-wise it was the same. 101 battalion also had or only had the white leader group, mostly white leader group, and then the black soldiers, the same as we had. So no, as I said, no, we didn't pick that up.
I would like to invite the 101 members to come and talk to us here, because we have skirted around them now with Ops Firewood and a few others they were mentioned. They were in with great respect, I have to say, so you people are welcome here. I need to ask you, there's another rumor which I've heard here in Europe. These people need to be educated. They say to me that the Bushmen were actually war criminals, that they committed all sorts of horrible things while they were fighting for the Portuguese. Cut off of fingers, noses, torture, you name it. And apparently they did it. Any truth to that statement?
Because I cannot talk on the deployment or with the Portuguese, but I can categorically state it here that while they were serving with the South African Defence Force, they never ever had any crimes raised against them, war crimes. They were, I think, they were exemplary soldiers, and they fought the war as it should have been. Maybe on the other side, the cutting off of ears and the cutting off of fingers, I think that is known throughout history, that the Bushmen were hunted by the blacks before, and the ears were cut off when they were killed, etc. So maybe it's the other way around. But as I said, I cannot vouch for them while they were deployed by the Portuguese, but while they were deployed by the South African National Defence Force, or the South African Defence Force at that time, they never had or committed any war crimes. Because if they had, it would have been made known through the normal channels, and it never was raised anywhere during that time.
You did say to me, sir, that they got trained the same as any South African infantry battalion. I've seen pictures with them, I believe, with R1 rifles. I've also seen pictures of them with a standard R4 rifle. So they would be like any other soldier. They're a permanent member of the Defence Force, later of the Southwest African Territorial Force, or something like that. I remember General McKeeler had something to say about how you say that in English. So perhaps you can just correct us. But they had the same weapons, same equipment, same everything.
Of course, yeah, they had the same equipment as any other infantry soldier that was deployed. We initially started, and that the whole of this defense force started or had R1 rifles, and then when the R4 rifle came in, they started changing over to the R4, which the Bushmen also did. At one stage, there were a bit of not rioting, but they did not want to use the R4 rifle just because at one stage there was a contact, and by using the R4 rifles, they shot one of the enemy, and it did not go through the backpack of the enemy. And they said if they had used the R1, then it would have went through. So there was a bit of a anti-R4 feeling amongst the Bushmen, but at the end of the day, it also petered out, and they started using the R4 rifle right up to the very end. But as I said, all the weapons, all the training that a normal infantry soldier got, they also received. The advantage that we had, that the whole platoon or the whole company were trackers. So we from the battalion side did not need any trackers to assist us during our deployments, because each one of the Bushmen that were deployed, they could track, which were different in a normal infantry battalion or infantry company or infantry platoon that was deployed, whereas our normal white national servicemen were not that jacked up with tracking, so they made use of local trackers, which was seconded to the SADF, Defence Forces at that stage, but not from the battalion. We never seconded or attached some of our members to as trackers. We, as I said, we utilized our own members as an infantry fighting unit.
There are a lot of overseas people watching us, and they might not understand the difference between an R4 and an R1 rifle. I wonder if you can quickly just give us the difference between the two.
Well, the R1 rifle, he was based on the Belgium FN. It was a 7.62 millimeter by caliber, whereas the R4 rifle was based on the Israeli Galil, and it was a 5.56 millimeter weapon. The R4 was a bit lighter than the R1. So with the R1, you need a bit more muscles to carry it, and it could get very heavy when you had to run with it. So, and in close combat, if you must choose in close combat between the two, it is maybe easier to use the R4 because it's more maneuverable. It is a shorter weapon than the R1. But if you need hitting power, then the R1 is still the number one weapon. So that is the main difference. The one is a 7.62 based on the Belgium FN, and the other one is a 5.56 millimeter based on the Israeli Galil.
Which brings me to a question, sir. I presume that your Bushmans were very, very fit men by the time that you got them, even before you got them. And I've heard stories that where they operated with the national servicemen, that they might be running so hard on the spur that the other guys couldn't keep up. Is there any truth in this, what I just said?
Well, Chris, to be honest, I never encountered it, but maybe to elaborate on that, because we operated with Buffels, the Buffel vehicle, the mine protected vehicle, when they pick up a spoor, they will put the trackers onto the spoor with the rest of the platoon or the company in the vehicles following. And it happens that they can, it depends on the condition of the ground, that they can run on the spoor for miles and miles or kilometers, and because as I said, and that is why I'm saying we had the advantage of all of them being trackers. So you do not only have one tracker that must track. You have the whole platoon that can track, so you can change them after 3 kilometers. You can put other trackers onto the ground, get them onto the vehicles, get them to rest. So they can follow a spoor for a very long time, over a very long stretch of land. And it has happened that they do run onto the spoor, as I said, depending on the condition of the ground.
When I was speaking to Colonel Brian Adams, who I believe you were one who replaced Colonel Adams, he said they had some problems with the Bushmen being going to the tracking school, the tracker school. And there was a bit of a misunderstanding culturally between the instructors and themselves. Did you have any of those problems as well?
Of course, we started. I think after what Brian mentioned, the times that Brian mentioned, because it did happen. As I said, they don't accept a person just on face value. It takes them time to accept the person, and if that person does not treat them according to them well, then it's difficult to accept. So it has happened, but we also started having our own tracking courses. We had a staff sergeant. He's retired now, Kokkie Leroux. He was an expert on tracking. So he was the course leader, and then we presented tracking courses within the unit. Because with the younger guys, we have found with the younger Bushmen coming into the system, they are not as experienced in tracking than the older Bushmen. So we started having our own tracking courses, which Staff Sergeant Leroux and some of his members presented. But we made use of the older Bushmen, their knowledge, because that is one thing that you will never get amongst the white leader group. So we made use of them. We had our own tracking courses in the unit, outside in the bush. So yeah, it has happened with the culture. There's a lot of stories being told about them adjusting to the Western culture and for finding it very strange, the Western culture, as it was told. How true it is, I'm not sure because I wasn't there, but they were taken one time to Windhoek and to the hotel where, when the lifts open, they saw somebody step into the lift and the lift closes and up it went, and the other lift came down and somebody else stepped out of the lift. So they couldn't understand why the one went in the side and the other one stepped outside. So those are stories being told about them finding the Western culture strange and difficult. But I think over the years they have adjusted very well to the Western culture, and they accepted us, who were in Omega 100% as equal. There were no antagonism against us at any stage in Omega, and our families, children, they were playing amongst one another. Some of the white, because as I said, the creche, the pre-primary school was mostly for the leader group children, but the school was for everybody. So there were some of our leader group children that went to the Bushman school, and they accepted one another 100%. But it could have happened when they went on courses, because they had their own beliefs in some things, and some of the instructors may have found it strange and told them not to do it, and then it's when there can be problems between the Bushmen and the trainers or the instructors.
When they were deployed inside Southern Angola, which is now a different country from Namibia, I'm just explaining, were they wearing South African Army uniform, or had they like 3-2 Battalion, a strange camo type of uniform to blend in with the enemy?
No, they were deployed with SADF uniform. They were deployed with the vehicles, the Buffalo mine protected vehicles, the weapons, everything was SADF. So that's why I say our deployment and our role differed from 3-2 Battalion, where they were more serious operations, if I can call it that, where they were dressed in camo clothing, where we were dressed in the normal browns that were at that stage the clothing for the SADF. So no, we never deployed with pseudo clothing, weapons, etc., etc. We deployed with our normal Buffalo vehicles, clothing as well as weapons.
Could any of the white leadermen speak Bushman fluently, the language?
Because I'm going to lie if I say now, but I know there's one or two that can speak. I think Ben Wolf is one of them that can speak the Bushman language. But I think many of the leader group had a word here or there which they could use when they were with the Bushmen. But to speak it fluently, no. There's not very many people that can speak the Bushman language. But as I think I told you when we spoke on this, that there's a lady, Marlies van Rooyen. She and her husband had a program on South African television called Namibia Groen, or Groen. She is fluent in Bushman. She grew up with the Bushmen. I think she said that she could speak Bushman before she could speak Afrikaans or any other language. So if you want to hear a white person speaking the Bushman language, she's the person that you should get in contact with. So yeah, there were not very many that could speak it. Of course, it's a difficult language, and you have to practice it all the time to keep in touch with the Bushmen. So as I said, I think only Ben Wolf is one of them that could speak the language.
How did you get hold of your white leader group every year, sir? Did you go down to School of Infantry and grab them there?
Yeah, there were times that we went down to tell them about the unit. Sometimes I knew Brian Adams went down, but sometimes also we make use of the members of some of our members that are on course at the infantry school to explain to the members the unit, and then they can choose if they want to come or not. If they do not choose, then because we need a certain amount of leader group in second lieutenants and corporals, then they are told to come. But when they do come to Omega, after being trained at the infantry school, they are put through a orientation course for about 3 weeks, where they are taught how the unit operates. They are taught how to especially work with the Bushmen, how to liaise with the Bushmen, and how to interact with the Bushmen. Because if that fails, then we have to send them back to the Republic, and we then must make use of somebody else. Which has happened, that some of the leader group cannot or could not interact with the Bushmen, and then the Bushmen push them away. So if that happens, then you need to replace them with somebody else. But yeah, we do go down, or did go down sometimes, to explain what the unit is all about, what they can expect. But as I said, if they get to the unit, then they go through induction course or orientation course to be taught, as I say, mainly how we operate, because we operate a bit with the reaction force teams, a bit different than a normal infantry platoon, and then also to interact with the Bushmen, because that is also one of the main aspects of the success of the battalion. If you can get that a good interaction and liaison with between the white leader group and the Bushmen.
So what happened further, sir? What happened to the battalion? Is it still in existence?
Of course, unfortunately not. With the independence of the then South Africa becoming Namibia, the battalion was brought back to South Africa. The members were given the opportunity to choose if they want to stay or if they want to come back to South Africa, which I think was a very difficult decision for them, because their roots are in Namibia, but being part of the unit and having fought against the SWAPO, which became the government of Namibia, I think it was a very difficult decision for them. I was not there at that stage. I was at 202 Battalion, which was in Dundu. So they were flown out from Omega, the members with their families and their possessions, which they had. And they were relocated at Smutsdrift, which is close to Kimberley in the Northern Cape. That was in 1990. Then in 1993, there was a decision taken that the unit will be disbanded. They do not have a use for the unit anymore, which is a very sad. It was a very sad day for the unit, because I thought they could have been utilized very good. But it was a decision taken, and the unit was disbanded in 1993. Then they were reallocated to Platfontein, which is also just outside Kimberley, where the members are still staying. They have been given houses. Some of them are living in tents, but they are not employed by the National Defence Force anymore. They are just seen as a Bushman community living in the Platfontein area as a community. It's a small town. We visit them quite regularly, as they have become also part of the 3-1 Battalion Veterans Association, of which I am the chairperson at the moment. So yeah, they do get a grant, a pension, but not all of them, because a lot of the members have died. Some of them have not come from Namibia, which they did not join the unit here. So they are still members living in Namibia. The other members, as I said, are living in Platfontein, but they are struggling. There's a lot of socioeconomic problems which they have. They are struggling with sewerage. They are struggling with water, which unfortunately it is very difficult to solve for them, because it should be managed and solved by the local municipality under which they fall. But unfortunately, I don't think they get the support or the necessary support which they need at the end of the day. So at the moment, there are no Bushmen anymore in the National Defence Force, as is also the case with 3-2 Battalion. They also went the same way as we did, that they disbanded the unit after 3 years in South Africa, and saying that they cannot see a role for the unit anymore. Unfortunately, but and that is the sad side of it, that they've been left behind, and where the SADF promised to look after them, so nobody is looking after them yeah, accept themselves and accept from our veteran side, where we try to see if we can help wherever we can. But as we are also a voluntary organization, it's sometimes difficult to help the Bushmen where they are at the moment.
But should anybody want to help and get involved with your association, what do they do?
Well, of course, they can contact me or anybody of the members of the association. We have a Facebook group. We have a website where people can see what is going on and see who they can contact. So there is always something that we can do for the Bushmen, but it is difficult in a sense that we also do not always have the financial means to do it, because it mostly comes down to financial assistance. And as I said, with the sewerage and the water and the stuff that is supposed to be managed by the local municipality, but they do not get the necessary assistance all the time. There are projects that we want to run, and we actually thought about extending the adult education training program that we had at Omega to also have it at Platfontein. But you see, for that we need teachers, we need a curriculum, we need a bit of funds for that. So yeah, but if somebody wants to assist, not necessarily financially, then they can make contact with the Veterans Organization. They can make contact with me. As I said, I'm the chairperson of the association at the moment, or they can go onto our website, which is the 31 Battalion website. We are in the process, and we have talked about it quite a lot, is that we want to bring out a book about the unit. But as I said, there were many books written about the history, how the unit was started, where it came from, what it did. With this book that we want to do now is we want to get the inputs from everybody, the Bushmen, their stories that they can tell us. The stories from the leader group, not only operational stories, how they went into a contact, also the other side of the battalion, what happened in the unit, the brides that we had, the visitors, which we had an average of 21 visitors group per month at the unit, which stayed over. But that is what we want to put into this book. We don't want to write the history of the unit again, because as I said, there's enough of that. So there's a Danny van der Berg, he's at the moment busy collecting all the stories and trying to put it together. So that is the one project that we have. And the other one that we have started now, it was in June. We had the first what is called the Manne evening, Manne Aand, in Afrikaans, men's evening. It was a get together in Bethlehem with the Mosque Club, where they had one of our members and one member from 3-2 Battalion, so as a Major Koos Crocodile, where they talked about what happened in the unit. The guy from 3-1 Battalion about 3-1, and Koos from 3-2 Battalion, which went very well. It was attended by a lot of people from Bethlehem itself, but it was small, and it was held in a hall somewhere there in Bethlehem. I attended it as well. But that is what we want to do, is to take the unit to the people, because I've said, and you've said it yourself, there's a lot of perception, there's a lot of stories about what happened in the unit and what people think happened in the unit, without knowing the truth about it. So that is what we want to try and do, is and take the unit to as many people as we can, by means of the evenings where we had talks about the unit, and then also with the book that we are in the process of putting together. So Danny van der Berg has done quite a lot already, but we are still collecting a lot of stories, because over a period of you can imagine for yourself 15 years, a lot of things have happened. A lot of people went through the unit, especially Hero Group. So, and each one of them have or may have a story to tell, be it operational or be it on the social side. So yeah, we are in the process. The sign that I've shown you behind my back is a raffle that we are having at the moment. It is closing now at the end of September, where we are raffling a frame with a Bushmen bow and arrow and an axe, which is framed, which we raffle out for 50 rand per raffle, which we want to use the money to get the book off the ground, because I think, as you will know, there's some money involved when you want to put out a book, with the editing and the putting together of it and the printing of it and everything. So we are in the process with the raffle to collect some money to get the book on the table. But as I said, the book is we want something else than the normal history of a unit. We want the funny stories and the sad stories and the fighting stories, and I think we are getting there slowly at the moment.
Well, the internet, we had a bit of problems with the internet. That happens in South Africa these days. But I think it's fine, no problem, it worked. I wish to thank the Colonel for his time talking to us here. I can tell you that there's every chance in the world, God willing, of course, that I will go to South Africa in November, and I will record the Bushmen soldiers themselves with the assistance of the 3-1 Veterans Association. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to bringing you those videos as well. In the meantime, 2 things. If you can get involved helping our Bushmen soldiers through the association, please do so. And the other thing is, if you have a story to tell me, please come and tell me. Let us not die with our stories untold, because then it's too late. There's no way I can get it out of you then. So please contact me, get hold of me. Let us get your unit here at Legacy. And until we meet again, God bless you all.